And Cynthia, as I recall, the rules are, I'll ask the questions that have been prepared. I think both of you probably have been made aware of it. They've been prepared, screened, and whatever by the Onslow Republican Women's Club. And the questions, some of them have been put together so that they so the same questions aren't asked multiple times. We'll start out with one question for each one of you. And I think ladies first will be in order tonight because I am a guy. And we have a time limit for your responses of 2 minutes. If there is a comment that you make or in your response, addressing the other individual, at the end of your 2 minutes, that other individual will be given 1 minute rebuttal time. Simple?
Got it.
Okay, first one. What life experiences, good and or bad, have prepared you to represent the 3rd District of North Carolina and make you the best possible choice? Dr. Perry.
Thank you. So I have had 34 years of life experience in Eastern North Carolina since we moved here in 1986. First and foremost, possibly, was raising 5 sons and being involved in all aspects of their life, of course. But secondly, in private sector, teaching and practicing pediatrics for 34 years, have been privileged to be part of the adjunct faculty at UNC in both Brody School of Medicine. And you know, working in pediatrics involves a lot of problem solving. It involves listening and problem solving. Of course, that's true for raising children as well. But that is what my practice has consisted of, leveraging resources, working for families. Then also I've been very involved in the Christian community for 34 years, teaching Bible study, mentoring young adults, youth, and marriage mentoring. That again is listening to problems and problem solving. I'll have to say also it really equips you with prayer as you're trying to solve other people's problems in addition to your own. So I would say those would be in particular the experiences that I bring that are unique.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Murphy, same question. What life experiences, good and or bad, have prepared you to represent the 3rd District of North Carolina and make the best possible choices?
I think this is a question that talks about experiences. What do we bring to the table? What do we bring? What are our politics? What are our qualifications? What are our abilities? I look at my politics. My politics have been proven in the state legislature. I'm a conservative Christian politician. I have proven that on that stage, I can be an effective leader. But I also go back, I've been a surgeon taking care of the people of Eastern North Carolina, the entire east of North Carolina for 25 years. I have listened to them, I have taken care of them, and I feel I know them and have community with them. Also a small business owner. I've run a business. I've taken care and had to deal with government overregulation and throttling of a business, and I'd want that to stop. Our nation has been pushed away. Our state has been pushed away. Our federal government has taken those things away from us as business owners, and I feel it's important that we get those back. If you look at what proven, they talk about future performance is a good measure with you can sell it from past performance. I've brought forth, and the thing that I've led most in our state has been trying to turn the tide in the opioid epidemic. That's a complex problem, just like a surgeon. Complex problem with complex answers. But I've been able to gather consensus, work with different constituencies, and actually effectively present legislation that got passed unanimously in our House, unanimously in our Senate, and signed by our governor. And we're finally turning the tide, just really this last quarter, on the opioid epidemic in the state. So I think qualifications and abilities set me apart and bring us to what I believe is a good measure for a candidate.
Thank you. And we're going to alternate who goes first with each question. Dr. Murphy, Onslow County is but one of 17 counties in the 3rd Congressional District. We think, everybody in this room thinks it's extremely important, obviously. With your knowledge of Onslow County, what do you feel is our county's greatest issue, and what plan do you have to fix it?
If you look at our 17-county district, we're actually the 5th largest geographical district in the entire country. The Northeast looks, and they actually identify more with Virginia. That's where their cable network is. You go out to the Outer Banks, and those folks worry about fishing and tourism. But you come down here in the South, and the military is the most important part of this constituency. And if you look at the entire district, the military is the most important constituency in the entire district. And I think it's going to be critical that your person representing you in Congress understands that the military comes first. And I've already actually spoken with county commissioners. I think it's difficult to represent an entire district as big as it is with just one office. And so I've actually spoken with county commissioners here and plan really during my first week in office to set up an office here in Onslow County to deal with the different issues that face Onslow County as really the crux and the main part of this district. Now, what is the most important district? It's going to be supporting our military, our active military, their families, veterans, but also installations, Camp Lejeune, Cherry Point. Those are critical for our entire district as well as the population itself.
Thank you. Dr. Perry, with your knowledge of Onslow County, what do you feel is our county's greatest issue, and what plans do you have to correct it?
Yes, unquestionably, Onslow County's greatest asset is also one of the greatest assets of our district, which is one of the greatest assets of our state and our country, and that is the military presence here. This is very unique. There's no place on the East Coast and possibly no place in the United States with bases like we have here. Given the expansive land, the access to 2 deep draft ports, the surrounding demographics of the base, all the bases actually, is very, very unique and certainly worthy of complete protection. Also, we house here on our bases 1/3 of our ready Marine power for combat here. So it's quite valuable for that reason. Also, in terms of an economic driver, $5 billion brought in annually is very significant, not just to the district, but to the state. So worthy of our protection. So I think as your representative, the first thing I would need to do is help you protect this asset. And that means one of the first things I would do coming into office would be meeting with the House Appropriations Committee, Defense Subcommittee, and MILCON, and VA, and related agency subcommittee to talk about DoD dollars that need to be brought down here to add value to our bases. I think that's very important, and I think we haven't had representation now in some time, and we're overdue for that conversation. I think also I need to be a spokesperson to help you bring down those relief dollars that have finally been released in Washington, will probably come through Raleigh, but we need those on the base to, again, increase the value to the families as well who are right now dealing with occupational hazards and such related to the need for hurricane repair. And I think lastly, what I would do is speak to the families and the spouses of our active military. I think there are issues there that we really need to address. I think one in particular that has caught my eye over the last 3 months has been the increased incidence of unemployment among military spouses. I would certainly be one that would support crossing state lines for occupational licenses to help with employment there, and would even consider such things as tax incentives for businesses that hire military spouses. Lastly, I think an issue that needs to be addressed here in Onslow County is the student impact aid. I think it's insufficient, and I think that's an issue that we need to look at through the impact financial aid.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Perry. And to our south, in the 7th Congressional District, we have Wilmington. A very large VA healthcare clinic was built there a few years back, primarily used by veterans from Onslow County. Onslow County currently has a veteran population of about 40,000. New Hanover's veteran population, 15,000. Brunswick, nearby, also in the 7th District, is 14,000. The VA clinic in Jacksonville is small, very small, and it does not provide many of the services offered in Wilmington, 50 miles away, forcing veterans to have to travel for health care, many of which are elderly. What specifically will you do to ensure our veterans receive the health care they need without having to go out of the county and wait endless days for their medical needs?
Yes, I recognize this is a deficit in this area, given the number of veterans that are here. I'm not sure I'm sure it's very complex in terms of considering building another facility here, but I strongly support the Veterans Choice Act now that enables veterans who cannot access care to use local providers. I think something that goes along with that, however, that appears to be an obstacle is access to medical records between a VA institution or clinic and the private private providers. So I think that would need to be addressed. But I would be very supportive of looking at other measures to increase the availability of health care to veterans here in Onslow County.
Okay. Dr. Murphy, do you need to repeat that very lengthy question?
I think the question might be longer than the answer. We just have 2 minutes, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I work with veterans. That's part of what my practice is. About 2 miles away, we have a veterans medical center in Greenville. But we are woefully inadequate in eastern North Carolina. We do need another veterans hospital in eastern North Carolina. You know, when folks come to see me from that veterans hospital, they are sometimes now given private vouchers to see me as a specialist rather than go all the way to Fayetteville, rather than go all the way to Durham. Unfortunately, that system is broken. It does not work very well, and that needs to be fixed. Our veterans need care close to home and expert care close to home. I see that all the time, and we work with our veterans all the time to deal with that, but I will tell you that's a mess. That will be improved if we get, and we deserve, a veterans hospital here in eastern North Carolina to take care of the large contingent of veterans that we have.
Thank you. And Dr. Murphy, President Obama's average approval rating, they say, was about 48% for his 8 years in office. President Trump's approval rating has hovered around 40% so far. Congress has about, well, somewhere shy of 20%, some down into the single-digit ranges at times. Approval rating and has not broken 30% in the last 10 years. Why is Congress' approval rating so low, and what needs to happen to change it?
The approval rating is so low because we have a swamp in Washington, D.C. And we have a president who has gone to Washington, D.C. to drain that swamp. But unfortunately, he does not have the allies that he needs to do that. And so if you look at ratings where people like folks, nurses are always number one. Congress is always at the bottom. However, usually you like your individual congressman rather than Congress itself. And it's important to like your congressman, but your congressman needs to be one that goes up there, helps the president drain the swamp, and actually, hopefully, rise the respectability of Congress, because they're not doing the job that we actually, as individuals and citizens, elected them to do their job.
Dr. Perry, same question. The Congress approval rating is very low, very low. Is there something you could do or you would want to do as one of 435 to improve it?
Yes, so clearly, when you look in Washington, it's no surprise why Congress's rating is so low, as there is total gridlock, and look at the absence of legislation that's come out of either the House or the Senate, even in the past 6 months. It is abysmal. I would have to agree that President Trump needs allies to move his agenda, and clearly his agenda is what needs to be moved. When you look at what he's accomplished, it's extraordinary. However, it is as if he has a target on his back, and everything is used against him as a political weapon. I think that this needs to stop, and if I go to Washington, it would stop with me. I'd have to say the second factor in this is it's the era of political of long-term politicians there who are really out after their own career. And I think someone needs to go who's not a politician, who's not concerned about that, but is rather concerned about representing the constituents of this 3rd district.
Dr. Perry, if elected, will you represent us as a full-time Congresswoman? And if so, what would you do with your current practice?
Yes. So without question, this would be more than a full-time job, I believe. I would not try to continue practicing medicine. I think I want to be fully invested. In fact, I know I want to be fully invested in my responsibilities representing this district. I think that will take every moment and more. My practice, actually, when we moved to Kinston in 1986, my husband and I looked at each other and said, when I was offered the opportunity to buy in, we're not going to do that because we're thinking later in life we might want to do something different, and this is that different. So I would not return to my practice.
Dr. Murphy, you have a practice. If elected and you're serving as congressman, what would you do with your practice?
As a state legislator, I have continued with my practice. I continue with it today, and I will continue practicing then. And why? Let me tell you why that's important. I think I can multitask pretty well. I've done it pretty well during having the responsibilities I have in Raleigh. But I think it's important that you maintain credibility. You maintain credibility with the average person that comes in to see you. Definitely, my practice will be scaled back. And if it's on a Saturday morning that I see patients, so be it. But I think it's important that you stay in touch with people on a regular level. I've had a couple patients tell me that they wouldn't vote for me because they didn't want me to leave as their doctor. But I will still continue to see patients because I think, I made a commitment to them. I made a commitment, and there is time. There is time on a Saturday morning or a Thursday evening to come in and see patients for a couple hours, and I will make the time to do that. But that will not by any means detract from my full-time job as your congressman.
Okay. Dr. Murphy, what can you say here tonight to assure these individuals, most of them are Republicans, I am not, so I can't say our party, but to support the Republican Party, promote conservatism and morals in our district, and fully support the president while never wavering or letting us down?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Yes. What can you say here tonight, to assure us that you'll completely be loyal to the Republican Party, promote conservatism and morals in the district, and fully support the president while never wavering or letting us down?
I oftentimes speak sometimes about what the Republican Party stands for. How are we different from the Democratic Party? We believe in God, and we are not ashamed to have it on our platform. We're anti-abortion, and we're very proud of that fact. We don't play gender identity politics. The word conservative, if you look at the base word, it means to conserve. And that means it's to care about the country. And that means to care about it not just today, but for 25 years and 50 years, for our children and our grandchildren. I took an oath in office as a state legislator, and I stand by that oath to protect the state's Constitution. I believe the Constitution is the greatest document that this country has ever seen, and it is the basis for what Republicans believe. Now, our Democratic colleagues, I think they'd love to get rid of the Constitution. I will stand firm in my beliefs where there is time and where there is an avenue to meet where a Democrat, where we can actually move forward, I will. But I will not compromise what I believe and what I believe is important for the future of this country.
And Dr. Perry, what can you say tonight to assure the folks here, all of the folks in Onslow County, and particularly those of the Republican Party, that you will completely be loyal to the Republican Party, promote conservatism and morals in our district, and fully support the president while never wavering or letting us down?
I have always been a Republican. I am proud to be a Republican. I'm proud to be a conservative. And when I look at my conservative values, I believe they first come from the theme of life, being a pro-life pediatrician. And that theme of life that originates in Scripture flows right into our Declaration of Independence, where we listen and hear the words life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And then it finds expression in our Constitution in the expression of our precious freedoms, the freedom of speech, the freedom to express religion, and the freedom to bear arms. And I believe as a conservative, the government's job is to protect those freedoms. Now we look around and see many of those freedoms are being encroached upon. I think that's wrong. Secondly, I believe that, as the president does too, I believe it's the purpose of government to protect us and give us security here. So that means, as a strong America, I believe in a strong military. I also believe in a very secure border. That's the reason I support the president's efforts to build a wall, to deploy any technology necessary to increase manpower at the border, because without a strong border and secure border, we are not a sovereign country. Then thirdly, I'm a conservative because I believe in fiscal restraint and a balanced budget. And I think that's one of Congress's first orders of agenda, is to accomplish those things. I signed the no tax increase pledge, and I believe in a balanced budget. Those are some of the things I believe that it means to be a conservative, and to support the president in each one of those.
Thank you. We hear a lot about education and the long budget. What are your top priorities concerning education, Dr. Perry?
I'm sorry, I couldn't quite understand that.
In the long budget, the long run, what are your top priorities concerning education?
In which budget? I'm sorry.
It says in the long budget. I'm going to assume
Top priorities in preserving education?
Yes, top priorities in concerning education.
Well, I happen to believe that education is a state issue primarily. In fact, I agree with the president in getting rid of the Department of Education. So I suppose, in considering that question, I would say the right answer is to let the states make this decision.
Dr. Murphy.
Nowhere in the United States Constitution does it talk about the federal government teaching us or putting education forward. That department needs to be abolished. We're working right now in Raleigh, we're working on our budget for the state. The educational budget is actually the biggest facet of our entire state budget. And that's what we work on, because what we do is what was intended by our founding fathers. We give local control. We don't need Common Core, which came down from the federal government. We need to get rid of that. And what we need to do is give the power back to local LEAs who actually can administer local curricula that they know best in their communities what best to teach. The federal government has no role in education, and it's actually caused a lot of the crises with student loans, where they give away money essentially free for students. So as far as I'm concerned, the federal government needs to get out of education.
Dr. Murphy, this is a very long question again, multi-part. What are your thoughts on ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act, as it currently stands? What, if anything, would you change? Do you support or oppose the use of tax credits, vouchers, and/or any use of public money for private K through 12 schools?
I'm an advocate for education. I have voted for vouchers for private schools. I have voted for homeschooling. I believe that children should be educated as to how their parents want them educated. We pour so much money into our public schools, but charter schools are public schools. They are public schools that give an avenue for children who may not want to be in their schools because they live in a bad neighborhood or their school is not good. I believe, again, I don't believe this is a federal issue. This should be a state issue. But I believe that we as parents, we as local individuals, are the ones who should determine what our child is learning and how they learn that.
Thank you. Dr. Perry, what are your thoughts on ESSA, that's Every Student Succeeds Act, as it currently stands? Would you change it, and what would you do to change it? Do you support or oppose the use of tax credits, vouchers, and/or any use of public money for private K through 12 schools?
I'm not familiar with ESSA, but I will be after tonight. I am a strong proponent of school choice for parents. I think parents should be making that decision. One of the things I've been very involved in with my husband for 34 years is both the public schools in Lenoir County and the private schools in Lenoir County. In fact, right now I'm on the board of a new Christian private school that's about to start that will be serving 80% primarily under-resourced children. I'm proud to say that because I think it's a parent's responsibility to make these educational choices, and I think it's mandatory that they have those choices.
Okay, thank you. And Dr. Perry, please explain your position on privatization of public education, especially by out-of-state entities, including accountability and reporting requirements.
I'm sorry, would you read that one more time?
Please explain your position on privatization of public education, especially by out-of-state entities, including accountability and reporting requirements.
So this is a question that I have not read a lot about this issue, but I would say we'd have to be very cautious with this. And I think there would have to be a standard that they would be held to, that our states would agree upon state by state.
Right. Thank you. Dr. Murphy, your position on privatization of public education, especially by out-of-state entities, including accountability and reporting requirements.
This is a state issue. We have this now with charter schools. Accountability to every charter school should be at the same standard as for every public school.
Thank you. And Dr. Murphy, do you support universal pre-K, pre-kindergarten delivered by a teacher or a device? If so, what legislation would you put forth to ensure the children of North Carolina have access to universal pre-K?
Again, this is a state issue, and it's something that we work on. I think we fully fund our pre-K and our other entities, but as far as making sure every child is fully funded, this is the difficult problem that we have. Where is government's role and where a parent's role? When I see a child, and I saw several this past week because I operate a lot on children, I beg their parents, and oftentimes it's a single parent, I beg them to read to that child. And that child may be 2 weeks old. And sometimes they look at me like I'm just a little bit half-cocked, but it's okay. It is important that we read to our children. And that's where it starts. That's where education starts. It doesn't start with the government. It starts at home. It starts with parents. And I think it's important that we provide funding for schools, but I think we actually have to now put the onus and the burden back on parents where it should be, that's where education starts.
Thank you. Dr. Perry, do you support universal pre-kindergarten delivered by a teacher or a device? If so, what legislation would you put forth to ensure the children of North Carolina have access to universal pre-K?
I'm sorry, is this question limited to universal pre-K only?
That's what it said. Do you support universal pre-K delivered by a teacher, not a device?
Not a what?
A device.
Not of us.
An electronic device, perhaps.
Oh, sorry, thank you.
I'm assuming.
So I certainly support the offering of universal pre-K, so that it's available to all of our citizens, all of those children. I think whether it's offered by a teacher, I think that's more important, I suppose, to have a person there in the classroom with the child. But indeed, the answer for our children's education is exactly what Dr. Murphy said. It is with parents, and this is what I preach to all of my families that I see in my practice is encouraging parents to step up and be parents. And this is something that we have to emphasize, and that is indeed where education starts and where education continues in the home. But I do think it's important for those children who don't have parents that are motivated in that direction, that they have the opportunity to attend preschool.
Okay. Dr. Perry again. Is abortion ever acceptable? What will you do about the Born Alive Protection Act? And should government make a way for adoption to be more affordable?
So let me break down that question. As a scientist, I believe emphatically that that life is created at the time of conception. That's the beginning of life. So I can't justify personally the taking of life in the way of an abortion at any stage. I think, however, any restriction on abortion saves lives and is a good thing. So I'm so pleased with the landscape right now we're seeing in our country as with the advent of using ultrasound in this way to teach people really life begins at the time of conception. And what was the second part of that question, Rayford? I'm sorry.
Should government make a way for adoption to be more affordable?
And the answer to this is, as we speak about pro-life, we need to first be speaking about supporting, of course, the baby. And for that reason, I totally support the Born Alive Protection Act, the one that we sadly was defeated last week, but also the one that's still waiting for a vote in the House in Washington. But in addition to that, as we support the baby, we've got to support the mothers in this time, in this situation. That's with the pregnancy care centers that we're pleased to have all over our country. But I also think we indeed need to facilitate adoption. We need to streamline that process and in any way possible, make it less expensive and more accessible to any family.
Thank you. Dr. Murphy, is abortion ever acceptable? What will you do about the Born Alive Protection Act? Should government make a way for adoption to be more affordable?
I truly believe that every life is anointed by God. I truly believe that each life is a gift that's given to us. I believe that life begins at conception without exception. It would be impossible for me to reconcile that anyone could terminate a life because they didn't like the sex of a child, or perhaps they found out it wasn't formed in the right way. We had a very sad day in Raleigh last week when we did not pass the Born Alive Protection Act. I spoke passionately on the floor. I had not planned to speak. But I talked about the fact that a child born at 20 weeks through a miscarriage had a heartbeat and was breathing, and that child had a birth certificate and a death certificate. Yet, if that same child is born because of abortion and has a heart beating and is still breathing, that child is not given a birth certificate and a death certificate. And unfortunately, my pleas came upon hardened hearts by the Democrats, and we lost. So what can we do to help women come through and not have abortions. We have to give them viable alternatives. We have a fabulous foster home program in the state of North Carolina. I've worked on getting that funding this past year. We have people that give their lives to these young children and gives them hope and give them homes. The same thing happens as we have children that come through who want to be adopted. We need to make that process so much easier, because then those women don't have the deterrent of what do I do with this child. They will give life, and then they give that life a life.
Dr. Murphy, what has been your involvement in your county, Pitt County's GOP or the Republican Women's Club? What volunteer work have you done to promote the party's agenda and or to get Republicans elected?
Since I have entered public service 4 years ago, I have been an active member working with trying to get judges elected, trying to get our district attorney elected, working out at the polls. Unfortunately, we're seeing a tide that I don't like in Pitt County. I was actually the only Republican voted in this past election. It was sad, and I think we've redoubled our efforts now. We have new leadership in our party in Pitt County, and we're energized. And we're going to make sure that we can actually flip back the tide on that, because we're already seeing some of the disastrous results because of a democratically elected two other officials that I won't speak to.
Thank you.
I'll be nice.
Dr. Perry, what has been your involvement in your county, Lenore County's GOP and or the Republican Women's Club there? And what volunteer work have you done to promote the party's agenda and or to get Republicans elected?
So to date, I have not been very involved in the Lenore County Republican Party. In fact, for the first time in 37 years, we had an empty nest in January. I've been raising 5 boys, teaching, practicing medicine, involved in the Christian community, then taking care of my mother the last 10 and a half years of her life, which ended in December. We don't have a Republican Women's Club in Lenore County. I've been involved in several Republican campaigns through the years. Gubernatorial campaigns, lieutenant governor. In fact, my mother-in-law ran for lieutenant governor. But primarily in the past 10 years, I've been involved in judicial races, Republican judicial races.
Okay. And Dr. Perry, do you fully support President Trump on building the wall? And is the southern border the problem there? Is it a national emergency?
I fully support President Trump in building the wall, and I fully believe it is a national emergency. Certainly over the past 3 to 4 months, we see that as the number of illegal immigrants continues to escalate, it indeed is an emergency, and it warrants any kind of emergency declaration that's required to get this done. If Congress would go ahead and move forward with this, it would not be necessary for the president to resort to this measure. However, as we mentioned earlier, they have not, and consequently, I agree with him in all his efforts.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Murphy, do you fully support President Trump on building the wall? And is the situation at the southern border a national emergency?
I have fully supported President Trump for declaring it a national emergency for building the wall since day one. Period. Point blank. North Carolina is not a physical border state with Mexico, but we are all border states. If you look at the news yesterday, you can see hundreds of illegal immigrants coming around the wall into the United States. And thank God we have a president who is fulfilling his campaign promises to do what he said he was going to do about immigration. And it is building a physical wall to stop physical objects from moving from one point to another. We have illegal immigrants that come into the country. They flood our school systems. They flood our healthcare systems. I see that actually up in Greenville. They take our educational resources. But we also, as I've been working on the opioid epidemic in the state, we have so much opium, we have so much heroin, we have so much fentanyl that comes over the border because we have such a porous border. Also, the same thing happens with human trafficking. We need a physical structure in our southern border to stop this total nonsense from coming across. We've had the last 4 or 5 presidents in their inaugural address pay lip service to this. Thank God we have a president who is actually doing what he campaigned on and is going to get it done.
Which brings up a great question, Dr. Murphy. What are 2 things you disagree with President Trump on?
You know, he uses tools at all his arsenal to get things done. He used tools to get North Korea to stop their project. He went over there, and he honestly did something that no other president has been able to do to Kim Jong-un, and he got him to step down. He did the same thing now with Mexico. He used tariffs, or the threat of tariffs, to pull those down. I'm fully supportive of what he's doing. Sometimes I may do it in a little different manner than what he does, but my God, he's a man of results, and thank God he's our president.
Dr. Perry, what are two things you disagree with President Trump on?
I can't think of anything I've disagreed with President Trump on. At this moment, I am thinking of what I'm most proud about, and certainly one of the things I so appreciate the president is the way he is confronting China, who has been such a bully in the administrations of President Bush, President Clinton, President Bush, President Obama. No one's been able to stand up to China, and our president is. The tariffs are difficult, but they are not short-sighted, because we're looking at the gains that will be made if we're able to confront China on this issue and begin to rein them in. When you look at what a bully they've been and the need to level the playing field here, I have great respect for what President Trump has accomplished through this effort with China, or what we hope he will accomplish. I'll have to say, I don't always, I'm not a tweeter, so I don't always appreciate the way he communicates, and sometimes his style is not exactly what we taught our five boys to aspire to. But I so appreciate what he stands for, because he stands for the conservative values that have made this country great and what I believe in.
Dr. Perry, I've asked both of you this question before, and it's not my question. What is your position on the Second Amendment?
So my position on the Second Amendment is that I mentioned it's one of those precious freedoms that we have enumerated in the Constitution. But you know, it's really not a right. We have the right to bear arms. The Constitution protects that right. So I think the original intent of the Second Amendment was to make sure that the government does not infringe on our right to bear arms. And I think that means to defend yourself, that means to defend your family and property, but it means to also protect you against a tyrannical government.
Okay, thank you. I have two questions for each of you individually, so I'm going to... Oh, I'm sorry. I did forget you. You remember about the Second Amendment. We had that discussion. What is your position on the Second Amendment?
Thank you for that question. I fully support our Second Amendment. I had a discussion with one of the folks that works in our operating room about a month or so ago. He came from Romania, and he talked about when the revolt of Ceausescu happened in 1986 or 89, I believe. They had nothing to fight against their government but pitchforks, knives, clubs, etc. The Second Amendment was put in our Constitution to protect it. Our founding fathers were reminded that we have a tyrannical government of Britain trying to take us over, and they never wanted us as citizens to ever have that threat and be unarmed again for a government to take us over. That was the purpose of the Second Amendment. I'm fully supportive of it. I actually have the highest rating that the NRA gives, and I'm very proud of that. But our Second Amendment is not to be toyed with, it's not to be diluted, it's not to be watered down. It is our Second Amendment, and I'm fully supportive of it.
Okay, thank you. I have two questions for each of you individually. Dr. Murphy, you first. Your first question will be, and this is just for you, how do you justify co-sponsoring the Democrat bill to repeal HB 2? And with this departure from conservative values, how can we expect you to support conservative values in Congress?
When Charlotte passed their ordinance, which started the whole controversy, they said, no matter what gender you want to do, or you feel that day, you can pick whatever bathroom that you wanted. And so we came in, and I voted for HB 2 actually on the first day that I was a state legislator. And we had a supermajority in our House, we had a supermajority in our Senate. So we sent that over to Governor Cooper, and he vetoed it. Well, thankfully, we were able to override the veto. But then Governor Cooper, and the only way he could actually do anything was to sue. To sue. He wanted to sue, he wanted to overturn HB 2. The problem with what was going on then, it has nothing to do with a basketball tournament, the NBA. I couldn't give a hoot about that. It had to do with the fact that his lawsuit moving through the courts and going to the Fourth Circuit Court was doomed to be overturned. So we would have HB 2 overturned and nothing to show for it. And so therefore, the ordinance in Charlotte would be state law. So what we had to do is we, as a state legislature, had to outmaneuver Governor Cooper. We had to go to Charlotte and say, repeal your ordinance, reset the clock, and we'll repeal HB 2. Otherwise, if we had not done that, Governor Cooper wins by a lawsuit. If we had not done that, then today, those bathrooms on the other ends of the hall would be unisex. The locker rooms in our schools would be unisex. It's called outmaneuvering our Democratic governor.
Thank you. Dr. Perry, if elected, how will you overcome your lack of experience in politics and be able to serve our district effectively?
I'm sorry, can you say that?
If you are elected, how will you overcome your lack of experience in politics and be able to serve the district effectively?
I believe one of the problems we have in Washington is we have too many experienced politicians there. I think that we need fresh faces in Washington that can really speak to life issues and problems from eastern North Carolina. I think that when we look at our founding fathers' intentions, it was to have diverse representation from the constituents, and that's what I think I bring to offer.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Murphy, in recent years, it's the opinion of many conservatives that the Boy Scouts of America have been in moral decline. How will you, with your involvement with the Boy Scouts, affect the way you vote on moral issues?
You know, they say there should be a separation of church and politics, religion and politics. I can't do that. My beliefs are my politic, and that's what I believe. I believe it was a national tragedy that the Boy Scouts went from the Boy Scouts to Scouts. You know, God created two sexes. He did it on purpose. We are His creatures, and I believe we are to respect that. The gender identity politics that the Democrats want to run is, in my opinion, simply absurd. We are diluting down what God's law and God's intention for our country was. And I truly believe God intentioned this country. He is mourning at what we are doing, especially in our Democratic Congress, what we are doing to this country. No longer are we respecting individuals, we're respecting genders. It dilutes the entire process. It, in my opinion, desecrates God's plan. And in doing this now, for making sure everybody feels good about themselves, is that right to desecrate what God's word says? No, I don't believe so. Now, the Boy Scouts are a separate entity. I can't affect their change as a congressman. I can't make them do what they're going to do. But I sure can be vocal about not supporting that move.
Thank you. Dr. Perry, in the past, you endorsed Democrat Mike McIntyre in the 7th Congressional District over a Republican candidate. Knowing this, how can we be sure that you are truly a conservative?
In 2012, I did indeed endorse Mike McIntyre. I met Mike 30 years prior when we were Moorhead Scholars together and involved in Christian fellowship for 4 years. Then he was in law school with my husband where they rejuvenated the Christian Legal Society together. We followed his career, and in 2012, he was the candidate that was endorsed by the National Right to Life with a 100% voting record. He was endorsed by the NRA. He was endorsed by the Chamber of Commerce. He was endorsed by the Family Research Council with a 98% voting record. I knew him. I knew he stood for life. I was pleased to think about a Democrat who would stand for life at that time. Now we look at the Democratic Party and we see there's no home for Mike McIntyre. Indeed, there's not. But at that time, I was unapologetically pro-life as I am today and willing to vote for him and support him for that reason. I was not playing partisan politics. I was voting for the man I knew who stood for the issues that I cared about.
Thank you. That's the list, the final list of the questions. President LaCourte has said that I can ask one question. When I was an employer of about 45 people in a television newsroom, I asked the prospective reporters, producers, photographers, production individuals one question at the end of my interview. Is there anything, Dr. Perry, that in the future, if you were elected, that I find out about you that would cause me not to want to support you today?
That is a great question.
I know that.
And as I have been dealing with the Mike McIntyre issue, and the issue of, on my first radio interview before I even filed to run, was asked the question, because it was pretty recent in relation to when the emergency declaration, Trump had used the emergency declaration for securing the wall. I answered that question by saying, you know, I don't know the answer to this because I haven't read the National Emergency Act, which I hadn't. But I have these concerns. I have the concerns about the constitutionality of the use of the emergency declaration in this condition and the precedent that it sets. Because I am a constitutionalist, I care about what the Constitution says. At that point, I had not investigated it. These are my two skeletons in the closet. I'm going to tell you, unless one is created in the future, I don't have any others to hide from you.
Dr. Murphy, is there anything in your past that I might learn about you in the future if you're elected that would cause me not to want to support you today?
No, sir. No, sir. I believe I have lived my life. Believe me, there are things in the world that we need to do over again. But I believe in my life that I've put God first, and regardless of the outcome of this election, I follow where He leads. And my proven track record of conservatism in my short political career, I believe I will stand by, heart and soul. So no is the answer to that question.
Thank you. And those are the questions. Okay, we're told that if you would like to have 5 minutes each to say what you would like to say, your campaign, or whatever you would like to address, any issues that have come up, anything that you would like to tell these folks here tonight, realizing that they're probably going to go out and tell other folks. Dr. Perry.
Well, as I watch the evening news and read the paper and find myself bombarded with what seems to be an endless stream of violence and poverty and abuse and hopelessness, I can't help but believe that the answers to the problems do not lie in the government's ability to provide more services, but rather in our ability to foster more opportunities for success. The heroes in our history are not politicians, but they are you, hardworking individuals, men and women who really strive each day to make life a little better for yourselves, your families, and your communities. We're made to be free, and when we're unleashed to pursue our dreams and aspirations, the possibilities are really limitless. We can never underestimate the power of an individual desiring to work for themselves and their family for a better tomorrow. It is the opportunity to have meaningful work and earn a fair wage that promotes self-esteem, self-reliance, personal responsibility, and eternal hope. The more that top-down federal programs create dependency, the more self-worth is diminished, and we replace hope with despair. Dependency is the tool of the Democratic Party, and historically, it's brought the downfall of nations. We are Republicans, and we must always be people of opportunity. Over the past 3 months, I've had the great privilege of traveling this district, listening to people, to the constituents, to their concerns, to their hopes, to their fears, to their dreams. From Moyock to Hubert, I've heard lots of stories, and I've been inspired by so many. In Jones County, I met Chris and his wife, Sherry. They were one of the over 100 families that lost their homes in Hurricane Florence. Water was up above their switch plates. They immediately, as a community, started rebuilding each other's homes. In April, they were able to move into their upstairs. And to this day, the family is continuing with their neighborhood to work to finish the downstairs so they can then move into the rest of their home. I've met Lauren from here in Onslow, who for 11 years served our country as a Marine and then chose not to re-enlist so she could stay home with her children and support her husband, who's also a Marine, who's been deployed numerous times as a combat medic. He comes home and he has dreams and recollections of memories that are hard to erase. I've also met here in Onslow Vanessa, a mother who personally has experienced the opioid tragedy by losing someone that she loved very much. Along with another mother with the same experience and a local pastor, she was moved to action to raise awareness of this problem and begin to provide education and treatment resources for others with substance abuse. Since then, she's been able to join up with local law enforcement, first responders, and community agencies, and through her very hard work, now has organized the Onslow County Quick Response Team, and they're having amazing success with their model that also includes peer support. This is what I think representing Eastern North Carolina is all about. I think it's about ensuring that disaster relief dollars get to that family in Jones County and in Pollocksville so that all those businesses that are still closed can reopen. I think it's about speaking out as a physician representative who understands that our active duty vets need and deserve timely access to the best mental health care available. And I think it means advocating for supplemental funding for efforts like the Onslow County Quick Response Team, where a community is effectively tackling a very difficult problem and moving the needle in such a way that lives are saved. It is this spirit of resiliency of folks like these and their belief that tomorrow is going to be a better day that has inspired me forever. I would consider it the highest privilege to be their voice and yours in the halls of Congress. Thank you.
Dr. Murphy.
First of all, I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. This shows that you care deeply about your country. And I think both of us candidates, we care deeply about our country. And we want to do what's right. And we want good leadership moving forward. It's been an honor to serve as a state representative. But I will tell you this, I have fought hard for the people of Eastern North Carolina. In Raleigh and other parts of the state, sometimes everything east of 95 is not given a second thought. And the same thing has happened with our federal government. As your congressman, I will be a statesman when advocating for our district and its needs. But I will be a relentless fighter when those needs are not met. That's just my nature and just my passion. You know, as I mentioned, there it comes to influential groups in this district. The most important is our military, especially here in Onslow County. I'm asked oftentimes, what committee assignments would I select? Which ones would I want? And some folks just think because I'm a physician, I would go right to health care. That's not what the district needs. I will offer that expertise, as I've done it in Raleigh. I will offer that expertise in D.C., but what our district needs is something it does not have right now, and that's a member on the Armed Services Committee. That is my first choice. I come from a family with a very strong military history. My brother was a pilot. My father was a surgeon in the Navy. It goes on and on back to World War I, World War II. I understand the importance of the military. I understand the importance of it to this district. The district itself, as I kind of alluded to, is a massive district. It has huge needs. It is a complex district. It has diverse constituencies and diverse district and needs. But what it does need, it needs someone that's willing to take and be out in the district, to be amenable, to be represented, to be there for the people, to not be in one central location. And I will tell you, it's important because we have so many different people. The people in the Northeast don't really see what the people here in Onslow County need. But your district representative, your congressman, has to understand all those complex issues. This congressional race is not just about one issue. We face many different issues in this campaign. It will require a variety and study of complex and intertwined issues to prevent strong leadership. You know, as I've said before, there is a swamp in Washington, D.C. There is a swamp, but let me be very clear. I'm not going to Washington to play games in that swamp. This is serious business, and the chips on the table are our taxpayer dollars. and the game board is Eastern North Carolina. My game plan is to go to Washington, D.C., hopefully serve the people of Eastern North Carolina well, 3 or 4 terms, and then turn it over to some other able-bodied person. I was the first candidate to sign the term limit pledge, and I will stand by that. We need good and fresh and continuing leadership. I look at Ronald Reagan as an early influence of mine. He talked about limited government. He talked about empowering the people, and that has inspired countless individuals to step up. More recently, I have another mentor, and that's Congressman Mark Meadows. Not because just we share political ideology, but because of the way he conducts himself. We are both men of faith, believers in our great republic, and that it was based in God and our Constitution. And we both look at Congress as an avenue of service. I will tell you, it's very important to take a litmus test for the candidates. It clarifies what the candidate really stands for. Who stands with you, and who do you stand with? I'm very proud of the endorsement of Mark Meadows in the Freedom Caucus. Why? Because they talk about accountability. They talk about transparency. They talk about being a voice for the countless number of Americans that have no voice. If we can't abide by that, then why go to Washington, D.C.? Because if you can't abide by that, you are going to become part of the swamp. I will tell you, endorsements are not like getting celebrity endorsements, like getting a soda pop or a sneaker. They understand that candidates often will say what they want voters to hear. I do not. What you see is what you get. Some candidates approach elections that they say they would need to get boxes checked. I don't. I approach it just the opposite way. I say to the people, this is what I believe. This is what I've done. This is what I stand for. And if this is what you believe, then I am willing to serve you. I think that's an important and a very clear distinction. We have a very conservative district. It needs strong conservative leadership. The district supports President Trump by a large margin. Congressman Meadows is one of the closest, if not the closest member to President Trump. And I, when going to Washington, will bat for our president, and I will join him in doing so. I will tell you that endorsements don't come without consequences. Congressman Meadows told me this. He said, me taking a strong stand with the Freedom Caucus and being a strong conservative with the president would put a bullseye on my back. And he was flat and right spot on. The Washington establishment, especially groups like Winning for Women who want to play gender identity politics, like Democrats do, have been attacking me relentlessly for the last 4 weeks, distorting my record and saying outright lies. A lot of people come up to me, are you concerned about that? And I say it just bounces off me. But what it does, it's a reflection. It's a reflection of politics the way I don't want politics to be. I think the people of Eastern North Carolina see right through that. When Washington Republicans, it's interesting, when Washington Republicans who have been the most vocal critics of the president come out against you, I think that puts me in good company. Perhaps I should thank them for my message. Why are they scared of the doctor? It's because this doctor is not going to go up to Washington to play games. I will not do that. We are freedom-loving Americans. We support our military. We support the brave men and women who sacrifice so much that we can live free. We love our country, support our president, and still believe that we are one nation under God. We say ma'am, and we say sir, and we say grace. And when we see a veteran, we thank them for their service. It doesn't make sense to a political insider that I'm running for Congress to take power away from Congress. But it doesn't make sense to them that the Bible written thousands of years ago is still the best guide for modern life, and the Constitution written 200 years ago is still the best guide for government. It is about we the people, and that sums it up. A vote for Greg Murphy is a vote to empower you. I think you know better than Washington how to govern your lives. So if I trust you in your judgment when it comes to our nation, I have certainly no trouble in trusting you on Election Day. I humbly ask for the opportunity to serve. I will do so with honesty, purpose, and integrity.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
You've answered a final question, part of it. You said you're in favor of term limits. Yes or no?
Yes, I signed the pledge.
That's how long? How long is the term limit?
Term limit, the pledge is 3 terms.
I'm sorry?
The pledge limit is 3 terms.
Dr. Perry.
I have also signed the pledge limit terms, and yes, I have.
Yes.
And I agree, 3 terms.
3 terms. Thank you.